Footballerei. Ganz herzlich willkommen zu einer Ausgabe von Keep Talking, eurem Carolina Panthers Podcast. Vorerst nur mit mir, ich bin Moritz. Heute erstmal solo hier, denn es ist eine kleine Sonderausgabe. Bin auch gleich nicht alleine, sondern habe einen Gast. Allerdings wird es eine englischsprachige Folge sein, denn ich hatte die Möglichkeit, mit Mike Kaye vom Charlotte Oberserver zu sprechen. Der ist seit einigen Jahren dort Beatwriter, ein Kollege von Scott Fowler, und da hat sich die Möglichkeit ergeben, ein bisschen mit ihm zu sprechen. Wir hatten das schon länger auch mal vor, das hat sich terminlich leider immer etwas verschoben, aber wir konnten dann jetzt eine gute halbe Stunde plaudern und ja, gab jetzt auch genug aktuellere Dinge zu besprechen. Von daher, ja, sprechen wir heute oder wechseln wir gleich auf Englisch und ganz viel Spaß mit dem Gespräch mit Mike Kaye. And now I'm glad to speak with Mike Kaye, the Panthers reporter for the Charlotte Oberserver. Mike, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here on our German podcast, and I'm very curious what you as a Charlotte sports journalist can say about the Panthers.
I'm really excited to be here. I really think it's pretty cool that the NFL can connect us around the world. That's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah.
But thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, we had to shift our conversation several times, but that doesn't matter because some things have changed for the Panthers in the last weeks, and we will speak about this later. But first, I want to ask you some questions about your job and working for the Charlotte Oberserver. What does the daily business of a Carolina Panthers beat reporter look like?
You're making calls to sources, you're studying the roster, you're watching film, you're gathering information on other teams to figure out if there could potentially be cap casualties or roster moves. You're talking to a lot of people in the league, trying to figure out what the pulse of the team is, what the pulse of the league is. It's a lot of being around your phone and a lot of being on the internet and writing, and every day is different. That's what I love about my job, is there's never like a dull moment, even when you think there is. The news cycle is 24/7. So it might be overnight for me and the morning for you, but you have a shot at getting the news pretty quickly. And so I think, to say that there's like a daily grind, that's like a general point, but it changes almost daily, depending on what part of the season it's in, right? Like during the season, you have practices, you have press conferences, but during the off season, which is my favorite thing to cover, you just have a lot of moving parts. Who could potentially be cap casualties? How does this guy fit a scheme? Who is going to be the next guy to kind of shake things up? And so I think it's kind of interesting how all of this plays together. And so, this is a long answer, but basically the grind is different every day.
Sure. We often read on Twitter from insiders like Adam Schefter or something like, yeah, the sources say. And I'm curious, do you also have some kind of sources, and how do I have to imagine that? Do you get text messages like, by the way, Brian Burns will get the franchise tag today, or something?
Yeah, I mean, part of your business as a reporter is to cultivate sources, build relationships, be able to break news. And if you're a good reporter, you have sources. And so, a lot of the stuff can be attributed to somebody in the know. You've got to be very diligent. You've got to vet your sources. And everybody uses them differently. You want to be ethical. You want to be transparent. You want to inform your fan base. There are things such as off the record where you can't really report anything. but it's for your knowledge and your knowledge alone. But there's also opportunities where, if you do get information, you can report it. Like, for instance, last year, I was the one that broke the joint practices between the Jets and the Panthers. I worked all day on that one. I got a lot of pushback in a lot of different ways, but I also was able to confirm it with multiple sources. And so, part of your job is not just to report what you hear, it's also to vet what you hear so that you're being responsible and putting out the right information.
Do you yourself considering as a fan of the Panthers? Can you say that?
No. If you're going to do the job correctly, you want to be as objective as possible. I think, there are people who operate as fan reporters, and that's totally fine. There's a space for that. But if you're going to be a beat writer, you've really got to maintain a level of objectivity, because you've got to be able to tell your fan base not just what they want to hear, but what they need to hear. And so I think, that's a dangerous slope, right? I grew up a Philadelphia Eagles fan.
Okay.
So before I was a reporter, I was an Eagles fan. I eventually covered them. There was no fandom there whatsoever. That was a part of my life that I completely cut off. I get my fandom in the Philadelphia Phillies baseball team. That's pretty much the only team I'm an avid fan of. But, in another life, I was a very avid fan. So I completely can relate to obsessing over roster moves, the last guy on the roster, watching the practice squad to see if there's a guy coming up. So I try to cover the team as I would want to read it when I was a fan more than 10 years ago, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. The relationship between the Panthers and the media seems to be a little damaged after David Tepper has fired Frank Reich after 11 games of the last season, and he gave a very, very short press conference with no or very few questions allowed. Can you give us your perspective about the relationship between the Panthers and the media, and has that changed the couple of last weeks?
So what I would say is, again, we go back to objectivity, right? You have to cover them appropriately. You can't put your own sentiments in there unless you're writing a column, which is what Scott does. I have an interesting perspective, I think, because I came 10 days before Matt Rule got fired. I haven't been here for the entire Matt Rule era. I am very aware of that. I try to acknowledge that in my writing. In my opinion, every time I've seen David Tepper in person in a one-on-one environment, he's been very approachable. I don't have anything against anyone. And I don't use anything in the moment to use that against other people. Now, there are things that are cut and dry. I'm a straight shooter, they would call me, I think. I call it like I see it. Obviously, the drink toss, that was something that was kind of hard to ignore, right? Or hard not to criticize. The press conference, yes. That was not the best look. The record under him is not good. But the reality of the situation is to take what they would call pot shots or, make it personal. That's not my brand of journalism. And I don't know that it's necessary. I think the Teppers have I don't look at it as the Teppers have a difficult relationship with the media. I would look at it as they have a difficult relationship with the Panthers ecosystem, right? From a fan base side, are you thrilled that they haven't been to the playoffs since he's gotten here? Are you thrilled that the last rookie wide receiver to catch a touchdown pass was in 2019? There are systematic issues with this team that one could point to as starting with the Teppers.
Yeah, sure. The team finished the last season with 2 wins and 15 losses, and Frank Reich was fired. And later we got that article from The Athletic, which shows that the Panthers organization not only had an issue on the football side, but also with its culture. And the article mentioned like a culture like Hunger Games. What is your perspective about the current state of the franchise, and how optimistic are you regarding Dave Canales as the head coach and Dan Morgan, who, after all, was part of the last regime and this horrendous season?
Well, I don't know if I would call it Hunger Games. I just think a lot of people had their own perspective. And it was when you don't, something that Dave Canales said at his intro press conference, he said, I don't like synonyms. Meaning, I don't like using different words to say the same thing. I want everybody to say the same words. And I felt like there were a lot of different perspectives and too many different perspectives. Now, they were trying to be open-minded. They were trying to build new ideas. They didn't want to be stubborn, right? I think that ended up working against them because push became pull. You know what I mean? You know, you were trying to fit square pegs in round holes, not to be a cliche, but like there was a lot of that going on, especially on offense. I think what's smart, typically what teams do is when you fire somebody, you hire the exact opposite of them. Canales is all about energy. Yeah. He's trying to innovate. He's trying to pick up the speed. Frank Reich, obviously older, you know, a little bit more calm, by the book. Canales is kind of the opposite of that. He's kind of a mixture in personality of Matt Rule and Frank Reich. And I think maybe that's the successful juice if you're going to give him a large landing strip. Look, you fired a guy after 11 games who was a proven head coach. I think Canales and Dan Morgan are going to get a long runway, probably at least 2 years. And so I think they're going to buy into a long-term rebuild, which is what they probably should do. And I think from their perspective, that's a good thing to have a youthful presence. They also hired a bunch of people that Dave has worked with, so they speak his language, right? No synonyms. And I think defensively, having Evero around, it makes the investment in him last year substantially more palatable because you switched up your entire defense for him, right? Like, so you've got continuity over there. Evero is well regarded around the league. I think that that's beneficial. Dan Morgan's known around the league as a really good evaluator. I don't know what's happened over the last 3 years. There's obviously a lot of different perspectives. I don't know if we're all, because everybody has their own opinion, right? Like Matt Rule had final say for the first 2 years, first two off seasons of Scott Fitterer's regime. And then Scott Fitterer, was very collaborative with Frank Reich. So we don't know everything. And so I think now we're going to kind of have a clear gateway of this guy's the head coach. This is his system. This is how he's coaching. Dan Morgan's there to get players and make the roster better. Period. We know what's what. It's very transparent. And if they can keep that transparency and improve, it's a very low bar, 2-15. You know, maybe we'll see some progress. But I learned from last year, I mean, this is my 10th season as a beat writer. Last year, I learned more about, I guess, projecting than I ever did in any other year. I've never been more off on a team. Like, I thought they'd get 8 wins. I didn't think they were going to be good, and I was considered one of the negative reporters by saying they were going to get 8 wins. So, you know, I think we just need to take a step back, realize that this team has a lot of talent holes, and they're not going to fill them all in one offseason. And I think, you know, we'll probably get to this in free agency, but I wouldn't expect any spectacular names coming to Carolina.
Okay, so free agency will start in a few days, and the Panthers already made some kind of preparation moves. And the most expected one was the franchise tag for Brian Burns. Do you think he will be part of the Panthers for the next season, or will we see a team trading for him or is willing to give up 2 first-rounders as a compensation?
That's the $24 million question, man. So I think what helps with this being the non-exclusive tag is this allows Burns to openly seek out his market and see what he's worth. If the Panthers like what they hear, maybe they make a similar offer. Maybe they offer a little bit more.
He wants 30 million, have the opportunity.
Right? Well, I mean, that's what's out there. But yeah, I mean, like, He wants to be paid at the near top of the market. Not the top of the market, but near the top of the market. And I don't know if he's necessarily worth that, personally. He's not really a two-way player. He's very much a pass rusher who is going to create havoc in the passing game. He's done some nice stuff against the run, but I wouldn't call him a top-tier run defender. He's not Myles Garrett. He is not Nick Bosa. He is not Max Crosby. Those guys absolutely change games in both areas of defense. Yeah. But Brian Burns is a 25-year-old two-time Pro Bowler who's only going to get better as a pass rusher. And so you really got to weigh. I mean, you've traded away DJ Moore. You've traded away Christian McCaffrey. And while Dan Morgan wasn't here for those draft picks, they're still building blocks. You've also traded away a lot of draft capital for Bryce Young. This team's way too untalented to not have a first-round pick. So you have to figure out, from a opportunity cost standpoint, not trading Burns, you're essentially giving up a first-round pick and probably more, and then paying on top of that with the cap. So it's something they have to weigh. I think I think Brian Burns is one of the top 10 pass rushers in the league, and those guys are hard to find and they're hard to replace. So not being able to get a long-term deal done right now has put them in a really awkward spot. Now, from the 2 first-round picks thing, I don't think he'll get an offer sheet. I don't think that somebody is going to pay him upwards of $28 to $30 million a year and give up 2 first-round picks. I just don't see the value that he had before. Now, remember, when they got that offer from the Rams for 2 first-round picks and more, he had a year and a half left on his rookie deal, so he was cost-controlled. They were contenders. They could go for it. And both of those picks were 2 years, or 1 and 2 years in it, down the road. They weren't immediate. Now you're looking at it and you say to yourself, well, now he's got to get paid near the top of the market, and you've got to trade away at least a first-round pick, possibly more. I think they can get a first and a third for him. Maybe a first and a second if they're in separate years. But, you've got to put more opportunity cost into this thing. You've traded away 2 second-round picks, an extra first-round pick, a lot of cost-controlled items for Bryce Young. And the argument's always, well, you've got a quarterback on a rookie contract. Yeah, but when you trade away those second and third-round picks and the first-round pick, you're taking away cost-controlled items that, if you hit on them, can help you be elevated. That's the reality of the situation. Everybody likes to point to the Eagles in 2016. Well, guess what? They traded Sam Bradford for a first-round pick the next year, so they didn't have the issue after trading up for Carson that most teams have when they trade all those picks. So I think this is a team that needs to have a first-round pick. There are too many talented wide receivers, too many talented offensive linemen, and too many talented defensive players to just kind of sit by. Now, if you miss on them and you've traded Brian Burns, you're further in a hole, but you're in a hole anyway.
Yeah, you wrote on Twitter yesterday that the Panthers must crawl out of the talent hole, and as a correspondent move, they announced that they will cut Hayden Hurst, tight end, and it seems to be like a move of clearing the books and prepare for the 25 and 26 season. So was it the right move to cut Hayden Hurst and get loss of another playmaker, which Bryce Young needs to have?
So that was a report by The Athletic's Joe Person. I haven't been told that specifically, but it makes a ton of sense. He just was not a fit here. I don't think... So I'm a big salary cap guy. If you cover the Eagles and Howie Roseman, you have to understand the salary cap. So you get a tutorial real quick. Essentially what they're doing here is they're taking their medicine, and next year they'll have a better situation, right? I'm trying to think of a way to, if you sign up for a gym membership, right? And the gym membership is if you sign up for a whole year, you can get it at the cost of $160. But if you, or $120, okay? And if you break that agreement, you have to pay $60. You use the gym membership for 8 months, but you know that if you cancel it early, you're going to have to pay that early charge, if that makes sense. Sure. But you get a job and you have to move out of town, right? You're moving from Munich to London. How are you going to use that thing? So you say to yourself, well, it's better to just take the paid money and let it ride out instead of paying the cancellation fee, right? So I think the way to look at it is dead money is spent money. And, with Hayden, you're paying for a bad investment. That's the reality of the situation. So that's one of the risks of free agency. I've been told that by multiple sources, that they're going to look for tight end upgrades this offseason. So you don't need her sitting around. Obviously, he had that dreadful head injury. He criticized kind of the coaching staff from last season. That could have been something that kind of didn't sit well with Canales. I don't know that for a fact, but we know how coaches get very sensitive to players speaking out. And so I think it makes sense. I mean, he's about to be 30. He's never really truly been a number one tight end. He was not very good last year when he was healthy. And, I think sometimes you just got to cut your losses, right? I mean, there's a lot kind of going around there, especially when there's a regime change.
Do you expect more cuts before the start of free agency?
Yeah, I would say keep an eye out on Dante Jackson. Yeah, sure. There have been reports about him, but I've been talking about it for 3 weeks. I mean, he's the easiest guy to be a cap casualty. Ian Thomas is another guy that can open up a lot of cap space. I've been told by multiple people that they are going to look into center. That doesn't mean Bradley Bozeman's on the chopping block, but it does send kind of like a red flag there. I think another guy you could look at is Miles Sanders as a potential June 1 cut, but he's not going to be outrighted. Like if you designate a guy as a post June 1 cut, you're not getting the savings until June. So why not just keep him through OTA, see if he fits, and maybe you can work something out. He's still guaranteed his salary and his roster bonus, so it's not like they're going to rush to just cut him and pay him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. The Panthers only won 2 games last season, and I'm asking you today, how many will or should they win the following season?
Oof. Well, we haven't even gotten to the roster stuff yet, but I think a good mark would be 5. You're more than doubling your win total from last year. You've made some progress. Hopefully Bryce Young has a few more of those games like he did against the Texans and against the Packers. And then you feel good about it moving forward because then you got a ton of salary cap space. They're going to have over $100 million next year. So they'll be able to kind of set a foundation this year with kind of middling players, and then you go for it in 2025.
Yeah, speaking of the next season, one thing is for sure, the Carolina Panthers will play a game in Germany. And since the Bucks and the Seahawks played here first in 2022, the NFL hype in Germany is constantly rising. And also the Panthers hosted a lot of events for us German fans here. My question is, how is the feeling in the USA about the international games and, of course, the Panthers game in Germany? Is that being discussed?
Yeah, people are talking about it. I mean, I covered the Jaguars before I covered the Eagles. I went to London. It was great. I think teams in the US get a little apprehensive just because they're losing a home game. And in their opinion, for no reason, unless they're going. I think, for the Panthers, they haven't had great attendance the last couple of years, obviously. So them going to Germany has not been as predominantly discussed. But I do think, this is an opportunity for a fan base to really travel with their team. Like if you're a guy who picks a guy or girl who picks one game a year to travel to, maybe this is it. Then again, they're going to Denver, which is a destination. Las Vegas, Philly. I mean, New Orleans every year is typically a spot to check out. So I think that kind of makes it difficult. Like the Panthers have one of the best road schedules in the league this year if you're a frequent traveler. But I think, I think the Panthers are excited about this. I think there are some fans I know the Roaring Riot's probably going to do something for it. They always do something with travel. So I think, I don't want to say that it's not being talked about, but I don't think there's as much angst as like Jaguars fans where they lose a home game or two every single year, right? Like, this is dipping your toe in the water. I think this is good for the NFL. I think this is good for the franchise. I think this is good for Germany. The NFL has gotten a lot of guys from the Vikings out there to come to pro football. There's a guy on the University of Charlotte's team who played for the Vikings, then went to Michigan and is now at the University of Charlotte. Like, I think infusing the NFL beyond London is really important. We get it. London, common language, probably easier to kind of pitch to and make a difference. But in my experience, European NFL fans are extremely knowledgeable. That you guys read everything. You want to be up on stuff. I mean, like, there are so many prolific European fans because, right, like, European football is so huge over there. When you find like a niche sport, probably there is an American football, like, you want to be like completely encompassed with it because you found this very cool thing. It's like when you find a movie that nobody else that nobody else saw, but you're like the first person to be like, yeah, I saw that Tarantino movie before he was famous, sort of thing, or that Kevin Smith movie before he was famous. Sorry, New Jersey guy, I got to represent. But like, I've had conversations with European fans throughout my career, and I'm always blown away because it's like, when you guys want to get involved in the discussion, you don't want somebody being like, what do you know? You're from London, or you're from Germany, or you're from whatever. This is American football. And I think one of the really cool things about football is it's so engaging. It's so tactical that I feel like it's very easy to relate across the board. And it's very cool to me that I get to travel and cover these things. I love it. I mean, I've been to London twice to cover games. Wembley was incredible. I'm really excited about Munich. Like, I think this is really cool to expand and globalize this game. It's good for my career. It's good for football, and it's good for the fans. And so I think, while you might have some fans that are kind of perplexed by it, I think on the whole, it's a very good thing.
Yeah, cool. So you will make the trip to Germany?
As of right now, I think so, yeah. I mean, I don't see why not. We haven't fully discussed who's going to go, but the Charlotte Oberserver will have somebody there. So we're very excited about it. I know Scott and Alex, my partners, are also very excited about it. So we'll see, kind of, I don't want to break any news like that, but we haven't finalized our plan, but we will have a plan, and I'm very excited to cover this game.
Cool. So maybe we can meet in person in November, or...
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love that.
Then thank you so much for your time. This was Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Oberserver. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Ja, das war das kurze Interview mit Mike Kaye vom Charlotte Oberserver. Ich hoffe, das hat euch gefallen und mein Englisch hat euch nicht allzu sehr vom Hören abgehalten. Und ja, wenn euch das gefallen hat, freuen wir uns natürlich immer über Bewertungen, Weiterempfehlungen, Retweets und so weiter. Ihr kennt das Spiel. Beachtet doch auch bitte mal wieder unser Buch, das es immer noch überall zu kaufen gibt, und auch unseren Newsletter bzw. unseren Blog auf newsletter.wekeeppounding.de. Wir hören uns sehr bald wieder. Bis dahin, alles Gute und keep pounding. Macht es gut. Ciao.